Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Pedalshift. On this edition, we go all the way back to October 11th, 2018 for a kind of missing best of. I had completely forgotten about this interview with Jesse Herbert on his experiences bike touring in Canada and also around the world. This was a really long, wide-ranging interview. We talked about all sorts of different ideas and hacks and things like that around bicycle touring. And this is a really good one. And I'm really happy to have, re-stumbled upon it. And I hope you'll like it too. This is a chat with Jesse Herbert, who is a native of Ottawa and lives in Montreal, Canada. He's so relentlessly Canadian, and it's kind of an interview / gear talk / the lab. It all sort of rolled into one. Oh, by the way, happy Canadian Thanksgiving to everybody. It's the day after as I'm recording it. It'll be going out, of course, a few days later, but happy Canadian Thanksgiving to you. Jesse is so relentlessly Canadian that his great uncle designed the iconic Canadian flag, the one with the big red maple leaf on it. I thought that was a cool bit of trivia from him. Jesse's an entrepreneur with a background in mechanical and industrial engineering, and that comes in super handy because you combine that with his lifelong love of camping and bike touring. Jesse's designed a variety of items that are super awesome and super helpful for folks that are urban or touring cyclists out there, and he does that for his businesses. Jesse has also tackled long-term tours of Europe and Patagonia in addition to his adventures in Canada. This was a cool conversation. Really got a lot of great ideas out of this. Gear ideas, eating on tour, stealth camping, minimizing your load, you name it. Lots of good stories too. Without further ado, here's Jesse. Hey, Jesse, thanks for joining the Pedalshift project.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to have you in on the show because I think that you've got a really interesting take on bicycle touring. And, I've always been sort of experimental myself. That's why we do kind of the gear talk. We do the lab. We do all these other types of segments. I feel like we haven't done a good lab segment in a while. It's when we talk about, experiments and hacks and different ways to make bicycle touring a little bit easier and better. And I feel like that you've got some awesome ideas on all of it. So what's sort of your background in bicycle touring and sort of what's your take on all of it? What's your bicycle touring philosophy? That's a big question.
Yeah. Oh, that's a whole conversation. Good thing we have a little bit of time.
Right.
I guess for me, I really got into it, let's say about 4 years ago. I was at a barbecue that I would host out in the park every Thursday, and this guy came along, who's now my friend Shay, and runs a bike touring company. And he told me that you could go camping outside of the city without a car. And it totally shifted my paradigm because living in Montreal, I got rid of my car and motorcycle and been trying to live only on bicycle. And it's a pretty good city for that. But discovering that you can go camping right from the city sort of blew my mind. And I bought a bike right away, went camping, and ever since I've been kind of obsessed with bike touring. Part of my background is in design and mechanical engineering. And so I just love solving problems. And as you know, riding a bike presents a lot of interesting challenges that are sort of fun to solve and fun to talk about because everyone has a different perspective on it and different experience.
You're in Montreal, as you mentioned. I know that there's a really amazing bicycle touring route. Is it the Green Route? Am I getting that right? That goes all through Quebec. Is that sort of the main touring route that you go on? What's good around Montreal?
Yeah, so they call it the Route Verte, which is the green route, which is a collection of cycling trails. There's about 5,000 kilometers of trails in Quebec. And Quebec is about 7 million people, and it's pretty big. So there's a lot of paths in the woods with nobody around. And some of those would go on small country roads, but a lot of them are on old railroad tracks. And so often that's where we go. And it's close enough to corner stores and stuff that you don't even have to think about food or stress about that kind of stuff too much. There's lots of empty forest, so you can guerrilla camp with a hammock, not leave any trace. And yeah, it's pretty convenient, I gotta say.
That's pretty amazing. I've heard great things about it, and I'm a fan of poutine. I'm actually wearing my poutine shirt right now. So the prospect of doing a bike tour and being able to have poutine along the way in any of these towns sounds like my kind of bike tour. Let's just put it that way. It sounds like that you're doing a little bit of trail, a little bit of road. What's sort of your preferred method, or do you even have one?
Yeah, for me, bike touring isn't something I plan most of the time. I mean, sometimes you do if you Like a couple weeks ago, we went and stayed in a yurt, and then we went and stayed in a teepee with a spa. It's that kind of stuff you kind of got to plan, but I really like going freestyle. So my philosophy is really about just minimizing gear and minimizing the volume you're carrying so you can be as flexible as possible and just do whatever you want, whatever makes sense along the route. Because if you don't know where you're going, you don't really know what to expect. And being flexible can really pay off.
One of the kind of changes in bicycle touring in recent years has been the shift towards bike packing. Would you characterize yourself as more of a bike packer, or do you resist labels like me?
Yeah, I don't have any traditional bike packing gear. I guess I'm more in the classic touring setup. Currently, I roll with two 15-liter front Ortlieb panniers and a Ultimate 6 handlebar bag. And that's all I need to... Well, my last trip was 4 months in Europe, and I lived out of those bags. So I guess about 40 liters total. I used to have 50 to 60 liters, and I've been able to reduce it. The bike packing looks super interesting to me, but going fast is not high on my agenda. I don't track my kilometers or my speed. It's really about enjoying the road and chatting with the people you're with and feeling comfortable, stopping and watching the waterfall or go for a swim or something. So.
What was one of your, maybe how did you approach doing that reduction? Because I'm sort of in the same boat where I've been in two of the larger back roller Ortliebs, and now I'm starting to find ways to kind of shift into smaller dry bags. And the biggest thing for me, at least, was finding gear that just kind of cinches down a little bit easier, like moving from a non-down bag to a down bag. What were the kinds of things that you've done to get from those larger bags into the smaller ones?
Yeah, so I guess the major thing I've done is I've completely changed my approach to clothing. Back in the day, I would bring a scarf maybe or a nice hoodie. And I've since gotten rid of all of my cotton shirts. And I only wear merino wool, like even in the city, because it just works so much better. So shifting to natural materials has allowed me to get a lot smaller, and moving to a hammock has made a lot of sense along those lines. And I've always been on a down sleeping bag, so no changes necessary there. It's natural fibers for me are the way to go. Polyester works well, but you need washing machines around on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've been slowly trying to add more merino wool into my repertoire, as it were. But yeah, I'm stuck with a lot of the synthetics, and they definitely kind of reek after a little bit. But I've gotten into the concept of trying to rinse them out as I've been going along. And also not caring is another hopeful thing, too.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about your hammock. I used to have a Hennessy hammock, which I really enjoyed, but I found that with a lot of the touring that I was doing, I'd be in places where it was difficult to find trees to hang. And that was just, based on the routes that I was choosing.
Right.
You're in Canada, which, spoiler alert to everybody listening, it can get cold there. Do you do underquilts when things get a little bit chillier? How do you handle that? Because that was the other thing that I found is I tend to run hot, but I would be on even a relatively warm spring night, would find myself just freezing in one of those things. So I've really gotten away from hammock camping. What are sort of your tricks in that?
Yeah, that could be a rude awakening when it's 4 a.m. and your whole backside is frozen.
Oh, man.
Yeah, for me, it's about bringing merino wool long underwear. I definitely put those on inside my sleeping bag, and I'll put on my mid layer that I would have, and just putting on a lot of extra clothes. And then I'll try and get the hammock as close to the ground as possible. And sometimes if you can find a low spot and get the hammock, below the average height, then the wind will really rip over the top instead of ripping underneath your hammock. And that can make a huge difference. But if your hammock's high up off the ground and the wind can rip underneath, you're just bleeding heat. And yeah, it gets pretty cold.
That's a really good tip, because I think that's what my problem has always been. I've been kind of doing what you always just sort of see on videos and stuff like that, which is, you throw up your hammock so that you just kind of sit into it, and that's the height you're at. But you're right, the wind gets all underneath that. That's not conducive to heat retention at night. Good tip.
Yeah, that's it. And normally, I would set it up so that I can stand underneath the fly, and then it's really convenient, and that works great in the summer. But when you get close to freezing, you got to think a little bit differently.
Do you have a particular hammock brand that you like, or maybe if not just a brand, but like a style? Because there's all sorts of different ones, with integrated mosquito nets and getting entry from the bottom. What's sort of your ideal hammock situation?
Yeah, well, I have a couple of hammocks, but I only have one like camping hammock, and it's a Hennessy. It's the ultralight one, I believe. And I have never wanted to even try anything else because I love it so much. Like, I have lower back problems when I sleep in that thing. I have the most comfortable sleep ever. It's like being in the womb or something. You know, you put your earplugs in, put a night mask on, and you wake up 8 hours later feeling refreshed. So I haven't tried a lot of the camping hammocks, and I'm sure there's some great products out there, but I've been so happy with the Hennessy so far.
They're kind of the original great camping hammock, and they're a little on the pricey side, but I've seen some other brands sort of try to come in and compete, but I don't know if they're built as well as the Hennessy. The other thing that's really interesting about Hennessy, and I'm sure you've seen all of these as we get into more of the hack discussion here, man, there are some really interesting hacks that are out there on YouTube about, you know, how to get the snake skins to work, how to tie the knots in a way so that it's a quick and easy take up, take down. Have you gotten into any of that kind of stuff, or are you just sort of, you know, stock stuff and you've gone with it?
Yeah, we've tried with some friends. We've tried making sort of ratchet systems, you know, to help tighten it. Because that's the tricky part, is tying the knots tight enough and getting enough tension in the hammock. There's been cases where people have broken the cables. I've seen that happen. But in general, I find it works well, and tying knots is just something that's fun. I guess hacks for me would be that I always leave earplugs and a night mask in the hammock. So whenever I set it up, wherever I am, I always have that, because you only have a limited amount of time to sleep. Don't want to be woken up by the sun necessarily. So usually you want to have an ear mask and earplugs in combination, just increase the quality of sleep so you feel more rested and enjoy your travels more.
Do you keep that in one of the internal pockets of the hammock? Is that how you pull it up?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do something. It's interesting. I didn't do that when I was using the Hennessy, but I basically have one little Ziploc bag that's got all of my sleep kit kind of little small things, the extras like earplugs. I don't need a mask typically, but the earplugs are really helpful. And then I'll also throw in, if I've got antacid tablets and you know, all of the things that I'd be like, oh shoot, I need an Advil or something like that. Like, I've got a little thing with a few pills and a few things like that are all in there, so that if I do need something at night, boom, it's right there. I'm the exact same way. It's nice to have that already together inside of the one dry bag that I've got, that's got, you know, my sleeping pad. It's got my sleeping bag. It's got my sleeping clothes, which is another thing that I like to do. Do you have a set of clothes that you use only for camp?
No, I don't. Like, I started off doing that kind of stuff, but I found once I switched to the merino wool, I can bike all day long, and then I can arrive in a city and go and meet people for dinner and look normal. And then I can bike out of the city and grill a hammock somewhere and sleep in that same hoodie, and then get up and bike in it again the next day. And I don't find there's problems. I find it's synthetic materials that just make my body feel clammy, and I start sweating more, and that's where all the problems start. So since I've moved to merino wool, I really don't need much and feel a lot more comfortable reusing the same clothing. I mean, I do bring some sandals that I made some leather sandals that are very thin. I do bring those for camp, because getting out of your cycling shoes can be really refreshing.
Oh, definitely. Just let the feet air out. I think I almost always bring a pair of flip-flops that you know, $1 or $5 flip-flops that I get at the beginning of every season, and by the end of the summer, they're ready to be pitched or recycled if I can recycle them. But yeah, I'm the same way. What's sort of, you talked a little bit about guerrilla camping, stealth camping, whatever. That's got a lot of labels to it. But what's your sort of philosophy on that, and what are some of the tips that you've got on how to handle that with a hammock?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the reasons I like the hammock so much, is that it enables that. It's really hard to do guerrilla camping with a tent, because you need a flat spot. And really, if you're guerrilla camping, you want to be not visible by anyone. You don't want to disturb anyone, and you don't want to leave any trace camper. So the hammock is a great way to go. You don't have to flatten down brush. And, you know, if somebody's just pitched a tent somewhere the night before, you can see it, and it's destroyed some of the nature. So for me, the hammock is the way to go. And there's definitely been times where I haven't had trees to hang it on, and I'll put it down like a bivy tent kind of on the ground, and use the bicycle on one side to prop it up, just to keep the rain off. So it's always worked out for me.
How do you sleep on a night like that? It's probably not the being in the womb situation. Is it something where you have difficulty even sleeping, or is it just you deal with it and go with it?
That's pretty good. I use like one of those air mattresses, like not a thermarest, but it's about a 3-inch mattress maybe. Rolls up to be really quite small, but it definitely provides me enough comfort. I've been trying to train myself to sleep on my back just because it's better for your body and stuff. So I'd say I sleep pretty well. You know, after a day of biking, you can sleep pretty well anywhere sometimes.
Yeah, no doubt. Do you use that same mattress when the hammock is suspended, or do you only use it if you're in bivy mode?
Yeah, I use it, I'd say when it's below like 15 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. Like below 12 to 15 degrees, I would use that. But in the summer, I don't even use it.
The quick is, it's 9/5 plus 32. So I would just say double it and add 32 and kind of go with that as quick and dirty. So let's see, 15 double is 30 plus 32, 62 degrees. There you go. 62 Fahrenheit. That's my quick and dirty. Interesting. I want to pivot over because you also do a lot of stuff with your cooking setup. Now, I know one of the things about the green route that you talked about is that you could go to different towns and you don't even have to get into cooking. But if you're in a more remote camping situation, what are some of the things that you do from a cooking situation? I guess we should start with what kind of stove do you use? Because that's usually the first question on all of that.
Yeah, well, as you know, you really start thinking about what kind of gear you're carrying and whether you actually need it. And now all I bring is a Frisbee and an open L knife, and I don't bring a stove at all. Because one thing for me is I want to be in the woods, but then I also want to be able to show up in a city and blend in. So I don't want to have a lot of gear. And also I'm taking like product photography for my company because they make bike accessories. So everything's got to be minimal and tight and slick and look good. So stoves was one of the things that I dropped pretty early on. And that can be tricky when you're in Patagonia and, you know, you need to cook some meat. But you come up with all kinds of tricks and you get it done. Like one of my favorites is in Argentina, they have this wood called quebracha, which means axe breaker. It's like the hardest wood you'll ever find. And you can get those coals red hot, blow it off, and you could throw a steak right on the wood and cook it right on the wood and it won't stick to it or anything like that.
Wow, that's amazing. I never heard that.
Yeah, and also just heating up rocks. Like we've made pizza ovens before. You know, usually having a little tinfoil around can be helpful. But sometimes I'll just take a red pepper and throw it in the fire. You can even stuff a red pepper with something else. And if you burn the outside of the red pepper, as long as you don't burn it too much, when you peel the skin off, the burnt comes right off and you've got this roasted red pepper full of whatever else you want to eat. Sometimes we'll go into a local store and grab one of those disposable tinfoil containers. Well, you love this one. The last time we went to this teepee trip, we went for some poutine at lunch and we bought 2 extra tinfoil trays from them. And then we're able to use those in the fire for cooking.
Oh, that works fantastic. Plus the poutine, which is, even better.
Plus, yeah, that's it. You're not so hungry for dinner.
What do you do on the nights when you're not able, let's say there's a burn restriction or something else going on and you don't have the ability to create a heat source? What's your go-to non-cook meal while you're out and about?
Yeah, well, I would say cycling has changed my eating habits even when I'm not touring. So I've moved towards ketosis a lot of the year and eating just sort of picnic style. So that's why I just need the open L knife. So I'll always, in my bag, I'll usually always have nuts, cheese, and some vegetables. And eating those kind of high fat foods works really well with my body and doesn't take up much space. And I don't need to eat very much in a day. Like I say, my food consumption goes down about 30%. So it's really handy for bike touring. I use the Frisbee because it serves as a bowl and a cutting board, which you kind of need. And having a Frisbee is always fun, especially if you're in a country where you don't speak the language. You can play Frisbee with the kids or whatever.
Totally. On ketosis, I've actually dabbled with that a little bit myself. And one of the things that I found with it is that hydration is a real issue because the chemistry behind it all is that you use a lot more water. Have you found that to be the case for you while you're touring? Because that's the one thing that I tend to struggle with a little bit is I find it hard to maintain eating a ketogenic diet while I'm doing kind of, more heavy duty touring. But it sounds like you've had some success with it.
Yeah, well, I definitely carry one of those roll up, I have a 3 and a 5 liter container that I could fill up with water. It's like a camel bag interior pack, basically. So that basically disappears to nothing. And if I think I'm going to be without places to get water, I can just fill it up and strap it to my back rack or something. But I haven't found that it's a problem so far. I just do my best whenever there's water available to, pound a water bottle and then fill one up. But it just makes such a difference that it makes so much sense for bike touring. Like when I got into it in Norway last year, my friend Daniel was showing it to me and we rode for 3 or 4 days together. My body got into ketosis and then we were waking up in the morning and biking, 50 kilometers in the mountains, carrying gear and not even being hungry until the mid-afternoon, which is a lot different.
Oh yeah, it totally is. And I found that it's just, I don't have the real weird blood sugar swings and things like that. I do intermittent fasting as well. And at first I thought that I wouldn't be able to stick with that while I was on tour. But what I found is that I actually perform better when I stick with the intermittent fasting. Maybe my feed window kind of tightens up a little bit, but I'll bike 10, 15 miles with just hydrating basically at no calories. And then I'll eat. And I feel freaking great when that happens. So it's interesting just sort of experimenting with yourself and seeing what works and what continues to work, even when you're doing something that's a little higher stress on your body than just sort of walking around Montreal or Washington, D.C.
Well, you notice when you do start eating carbs, you get those sugar crashes and you notice how hungry you are all of a sudden. And I'm sure maybe you're aware of this, I'm sure, but in case some of the listeners aren't, like there's this mechanism when you eat sugar that your body gets hungry and stores energy. So imagine if you're a caveman and you're a cave person and you're in front of some berries, the berries are only going to be around for a week. So your body wants you to eat as many of them as possible and store that energy as fat. And that's why we have dessert after dinner, because it helps us store the fat that we've just eaten. And that's almost a genius invention, if you were short on food, but we're not really short on food. And it's been interesting to learn for myself what that feels like to be off sugar completely and not be hungry.
Yeah, I've talked about it on the podcast quite a bit that I've been off sugar for well over a year now with, obviously you get some different types of sugars, but, definitely no sucrose. And that has made a huge difference in all sorts of elements of my health and my ability to ride and keeping the weight off. It's been really a really nice thing to have as I'm starting to get not so much younger anymore. And my physical abilities aren't exactly keeping up as the earth spins around the sun a few more times. It's something that's been really helpful for me. And it sounds like it has been for you as well.
Yeah, just getting more efficient. And I think our bodies are kind of made to do this, particularly men in their, late 30s and 40s and stuff. They tend to get extremely efficient in a lot of ways. I feel like we're supposed to be running through the woods. And that's what bike touring feels like to me is, almost like hunting, running with a pack of other people through the woods and looking for something. Bodies are meant to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel better when I do a good long bike tour. I feel better every night. It's great. You talked about how you've got an engineering kind of background and that you're building stuff through your company. You're offering all sorts of different things through your website about bicycling and making life easier. What's kind of your favorite thing that you've ever designed that fit a need that you had?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, there's this bike bag that I've made and spoiler alert, it's sold out and I don't have any more, but it's amazing. It's like a saddlebag for the rear rack of the bike and it holds a laptop on one side and then it's got about a 20-liter bag on the other side and it's waxed canvas with a little bit of leather. It's the type of thing that I can use in the city every day. I can turn it into a backpack when I hop on the plane and then take it off and it turns into a pannier and it looks more like a briefcase or a nice backpack than camping gear. And the more I do the bike touring, the more I'm trying to make my city biking the same as my bike touring. So I designed this bag for that purpose and I've used it. I took it, 4 months in Europe last year, biking for 3 hours in the rain in Ireland and my laptop's still fine and didn't get wet. So that's one of my favorites, I would say.
Have you been getting folks who would sort of like write to you and say, hey, I've got this particular need that gave you an idea ever for creating a different type of a product? Maybe it was something like that or something different. I'm curious because I think that's the one little bit of skill set that I would love to have, but sadly don't. But, it's just sort of like trying to be able to invent something that meets a need. I'm pretty good at with duct tape and zip ties and kind of hacking stuff, but the ability to kind of create something out of whole cloth or leather or whatever you're working in at the time. That's a pretty fun thing. Have you been able to kind of help someone out when they've brought a need to you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, actually, when I took a break from engineering, I worked as an artisan for about a year or more and just made custom stuff for people all the time because I wanted to get my making skills back up to par. And then when I started Oopsmark, one of my friends was like, can you make something to carry these beers on my bike? And I said, well, there's not enough space there, but a bottle of wine would be perfect. So I made this bicycle wine rack for him and put that on the internet. And then that went viral. So I had some great success with that. And then I polled all the people in the cycling industry to see like, what do stores need? What do customers need that doesn't exist? And the main thing people said was a way to carry your U-lock. So I worked on that for quite a while and came up with a product that holds your U-lock quietly on your bike in a bunch of different ways. So I'm definitely always inspired by my needs and the needs of other people. And you know, engineers are great at solving other people's problems, not always great at solving their own problems.
Definitely. Since you're sort of nominally in the bike industry and in the sense that you're creating products around all of that, where do you kind of see everything going? Do you see any trends or anything, whether it's bike touring or in the more broader sense, like in the commuting space?
Yeah, I would say it really depends on where you're talking about. Like North America is changing quite a bit in the sense that people are getting back into urban cycling. They're sort of reinventing it. When you go over to Europe, it's just normal in a lot of places and you can bike all through Germany without going on the road, basically. So in North America, I'm definitely seeing more and more people who are just cycling every day, getting rid of their cars or not. And, you know, maybe commuter cycling to work. Seems like bike touring is on the rise. Like when I look around town now, I see more and more touring bikes every year. So people enjoying that, which is great. I think the maybe fixie trend has dipped down a little bit. The sport cycling, I think, is a little fixed. Mountain biking, I'm not really sure. But I definitely see bike touring and urban cycling taking off. And this bike packing thing has been a renaissance for gear and accessories for bike touring. You know, it's great for the manufacturers because they have a new sort of ballpark to play in. And I haven't tried it myself, but everyone seems to love it. And you know, getting rid of your racks can make a lot of sense if you're trying to go light.
Yeah, and it also opens up the ability to utilize different types of bikes and to be able to really get off-road and be on the types of bikes that maybe you never could put bags on before. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. I feel like I kind of resisted it a little bit at first because I got into bike touring long enough ago that it was like, okay, this is what you do. You buy the Ortlieb panniers and you get this type of bike and you do this and you do that. There's almost a uniform. But now things have really started to change and everybody's setup is so utterly different and cool. And bikes can go places that they never really could before. So we're seeing with fat bikes and stuff like that. I think it's pretty exciting. So it's nice to see that confirmation from your perspective as well.
Yeah, I am totally interested in trying it, but I do find with my small front panniers, like I go bushwhacking all the time and I do sort of bike and hike stuff. There's never been anywhere I'm like, I can't go there with this bike, you know?
Totally.
I have 34 millimeter Schwalbe Mondials, I think. They basically never get holes in them and pretty good on gravel. You can deflate them a little bit in gravel. Yeah. Trying to do one bike to rule them all, you know?
Oh yeah, that's always helpful. I have two. I'm down to two basically, but the other one is a Brompton, and Bromptons do have their limitations. Yeah. Even though I try to push it a little bit, it's nice to have a bike that I use as my commuter bike and for my touring. It just kind of makes more sense than to have multiple bikes. Plus, it's not like I have a ton of space in my teeny tiny little apartment here. So
that's sort of it. In Montreal here, it's space is at a premium, so having a bunch of bikes is a problem. Plus you got winter. You don't want to leave them outside all year. So people hang them in all kinds of funny places.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned winter because Montreal, I know, is a really great bike town, but I only have experienced the bicycling during, well, the more temperate months, shall we say. What's Montreal like as a biking town in the winter? Because it gets a special kind of cold up there. I know I don't need to tell you that.
Yeah, well, maybe you'll have to come down in the winter and we can show you.
Oh, I've done it before. We went up a few years ago to visit our friends, and it was after one of those kind of patented Great Montreal snowstorms where there was, a meter of snow on the ground. I mean, it was a real deal snowstorm. And, it was just sort of like the town has a very different vibe when it's sort of cloistered in like that. What's it like for bicycling? Is there anybody that goes out? Has that been changing with fat bikes? What's sort of the vibe there now?
Yeah, well, it's every year you see more and more people cycling in the winter, which is great. And it's a lot of fun. It's sort of like riding a snowmobile. It's less practical, and I do it much less. Like I just take the time and I walk a lot of places, which is nice, but I definitely enjoy, biking through the snow. You slip around and you get so hot. Like people think you get cold, but you get so hot, That's always a challenge for me. Like I've heard you say in the podcast that you run hot, and I run pretty hot as well. And that's the problem, is like, how do you not burst into, sweaty time?
Well, that's where all the layers come in, and the merino wool and all of that other good stuff, because I think I mentioned it on, was it the last show or the show before, that when I get on a bike, I try to get on it with the clothing that I know I'm going to need as I ride. So I may be freezing when I start, but then, once I get up and going, then my body heat cranks up and I feel great. And everybody probably is looking at me like I'm a fool because I'm not wearing a jacket or whatever.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that specifically now because it's fall. It's getting quite cold. It's around 60 degrees currently, I guess, Fahrenheit. There's a couple tricks I use for that maybe could share with the listeners. And one of them is get these arm covers. I don't even know what you call them. They have like a thumb hole in them and they go up to about your bicep. And if I wear that with a tank top, it's almost like wearing a long sleeve shirt, but without the armpits. So you can just cool off really quickly. I love that because it's something that you can even put in your pocket. And then later in the evening when it's colder, you just throw those on and it feels like you're wearing a long sleeve shirt. So that in combination with, I have a Giro light shell that's got holes in the back. That thing is so small that you can just pop it out, put it on, even during those warm up periods you're talking about where sometimes it's so cold and you're like, should I just wear what I'm going to be wearing in 15 minutes or do I need something just to get my body temperature back up? I use that a lot. Packs up super small. And I love the holes in the back, so it just breathes so well that you don't get sweaty, really.
That's really nice because when you've got something that can retain a little bit of heat for you, but once you warm up can vent it off, that's huge. Those arm warmers that you use, are those also merino wool?
Yeah, they're merino wool. I bought them off Etsy.
Of all places, right?
That's amazing. Some girl in Vancouver. Yeah, they were like $7 or something.
It's funny.
$10. I can't even remember, but
I use sunshade arm coolers, I guess you'll call them, in the summer. And, I've tried thinking, oh, it's great to have a layer during the winter, but just the nature of the fabric is it just vents heat off of you. It's actually a cooling type of a thing. So I've always been like, I would love to have something that keeps my arms warm. And it's like, of course they make them out of merino wool. So I'll have to look into that as things start to cool down. If they ever do down here, I think it's going to be 90 Fahrenheit tomorrow in DC in October.
Oh boy.
Insert global warming, climate change commentary here. So
yeah, the same thing goes for me for the pants, like wearing those, I don't know if they're neoprene or whatever they are, those leg warmers. Cause I pretty well, in terms of pants, I only bring a pair of jean shorts and that's what I cycle in all the time. And I can wear them in the city, and throwing on these leggings, they just tuck underneath the jean shorts. And it's like you have pants all of a sudden. You can almost get away with it in the city too.
And then it can be the one piece of cotton that you actually have on you.
Yeah.
But denim's a little different, I guess. It's not quite the same. Any other last kind of thoughts on tips for, whether you're new or you're experienced? Maybe something that's a little bit nutty. One of your favorite kind of crazy hacks that you've got?
Well, there's one that I really like for my Ortlieb front pannier. It's the Ultimate 6, I think it's called. It's sort of the standard front classic touring bag that people would have. And one of the major problems is that people who have lower entry-level shifters, the gear shifting cable goes right across where the handlebar bag wants to go. And, it works for the Ortlieb 6, and this could work for all kinds of handlebar bags. But the question is, how do you get those cables out of the way so you can put your handlebar bag there? And what I did is I took some of these, they're like 90-degree stainless steel tubes that are used on just above brake shoes for brake cables to make them bend 90 degrees, and put those on the shifter cables, and it got the cables out of the way. And that was a really big deal because you don't want to have to buy, $300 worth of different shifters just so you can get the cables out of the way so you can put a handlebar bag on. I don't know if that makes sense describing it that way.
No, it totally does. And it's really interesting because most of the time when I've run into people who have that issue, they'll go to a double stem setup. They'll change some bigger physical element, but that's a much more, I don't know, elegant solution when it comes to it. It's sort of like the noodle that's down by your brake cables as well, that sort of bends it a little bit more out of the way. It's the same idea. It's just a little more, burly, it sounds like, but that's a really good idea. I may have to look into that too.
Yeah, and I've used that for over 2 years and haven't had any cable problems in terms of wear or anything. So seems to work fine.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And I think that sounds like something that you could conceivably apply at other points where cables can get in the way, is just finding a way to sort of manipulate it using a stiffer bit of tubing, or, you said it was steel that you were using? Yeah,
these are like stainless steel 90-degree bends.
That's amazing.
It's not super sharp. It's wide enough, and then the handlebar bag fits in perfectly, and it can still shift and everything. And before it was a problem, my cables were bent, and you're going through the mountains thinking like, oh my gosh, are my cables going to break? What's going to happen? Not a good feeling.
I've had, it's interesting that you say that. I've had situation on a tour I did this year in Missouri on the Katy Trail, where I had this very mysterious, catastrophic cable break of my shifter cables. And I still don't know what ended up happening, but it was all in that kind of area. So you never know. It might have gotten knocked. The bike might have fallen. But if I had it maybe shifted out of the way with something like that, maybe it wouldn't have happened. So that is a good tip for keeping stuff out of the way and maybe even protecting them a little bit too. That's A+. So you are creating all sorts of interesting stuff over at oopsmark.ca. Is that the best place for people to kind of reach out and check out your stuff?
Yeah, that's it. You can check us out there on Instagram, all the social stuff. We do mostly Instagram. We try and share a lot of bike touring tips and tricks, how to keep your bike from getting stolen, like all these sort of things. I mean, maybe we should talk about that for a second, because I see this every day and I can't understand why the industry hasn't pushed these available products to people. Like, people are worried about their bikes getting stolen, and there's solutions to fix a lot of these problems. Like, people carry a U-lock and a cable. Like, the cable is completely unnecessary because you can replace the pins on your wheels so that they're locked with custom keys so that nobody can take your wheels off. I have my seat stem locked as well. So I feel very comfortable leaving my bike in a lot of places because people cannot steal the stuff that they normally steal. And those things cost $80 to get the premium ones. Like, Pinhead is what I use.
Yeah.
And those have completely unique keys. And I don't know what a bike cable costs, but it's marginally more expensive. And I think it's really worth investing in that kind of stuff on your bike, so you can feel like, yeah, it's okay for me to leave my bike. I'm going to go have another adventure, go into a concert, or go whatever you want to do along your bike tour, whatever comes up. You want to feel comfortable leaving your bike around, and particularly in the city, I guess, as well, where people feel their bikes are going to get stolen, and they talk about how they don't use their bikes because they're worried about it. Like, don't be worried about it. Just pay an extra $40 and lock it down and get a good lock. Like, personally, I like the Abus. I use an Abus Bordeaux lock. Not the lightest thing in the world, but U-locks are getting better, but older U-locks, you can take them off with a hammer.
Yeah, not only that, and then if you don't use good technique, I've seen situations where people or thieves have lifted up a bike, rotated it, and just snapped the U-lock right off. So if you're not locking it in a good spot or in a good location with it nice and tight, you could make it so that the leverage of the bike can be used against it to defeat it in and of itself. So, there's lots of different things that one has to think about when you're locking a bike. But yeah, there was another company that I'm trying to remember, because my buddy in San Francisco, and of course, San Francisco is just legendary for bike theft, but he did the same thing, I think with a different product, but same idea. But I've also heard of folks using things like filling up the holes with wax or other things, not to be a complete defeat against folks coming in, but to stop your bike from being the lowest hanging fruit. And that's really, ultimately, when it comes to bike theft, is you don't want to be the easiest bike to steal, because if it's not, they'll move on to the one that's a lot easier and quicker.
Exactly. And there's lots of solutions out there. Yeah, there's the wax to fill the hex holes. Some people glue ball bearings in there with some blue Loctite. That's like a bike mechanic trick.
Yeah.
But at Eurobike last year, I met a guy who had made hexagonal magnets that would fit right in there, and you needed a custom key to get them out. It was one of the most elegant solutions I've seen because it uses what you already have on your seat stem and stuff, and you can lock your handlebars and everything from being lifted.
I really like that idea. That's kind of nice. That's been the one thing is I didn't want to have a special tool to be able to make any adjustments. But, you know, I've been like, I don't want my Brooks saddle to get stolen because it's so easy with a hex key. But I love the idea of that magnet trick. That's pretty cool. Elegant is the word.
Yeah, and there's collars. There's collars to lock your saddle so that people can't take it as well.
Yeah,
it just slides up the seat stem so you can't get the Allen key into the head of the screws.
Yeah, I feel like that there's been some really interesting, elegant solutions to bike theft. It always feels like I think that a motivated bike thief with the right tools will be able to defeat almost anything. But if you make it even moderately harder, then it's far more likely that a bike thief's just going to move on to someone else, unless you've got an outrageously valuable bike or an outrageously valuable thing on your bike that they're really wanting to get at. You know, somebody with a battery-powered angle grinder is going to be able to get whatever the heck they want, but that's a very motivated thief.
Well, you look in Amsterdam and stuff, people don't even lock their bikes a lot of the time. They just have those horseshoe locks on them, and people could pick up the bikes and walk away, and they do from time to time, but people don't really seem to care about their bikes there as much. It's different here. We take a lot of pride in our rides.
Yeah, it's a much more utilitarian type of a thing, and which is interesting because it's so much more of an important transportation source over there. It's just fascinating to see how different cultures are and behave and all those other types of things. It's just fascinating. That's why one of the other things why I like about bicycle touring is just seeing different places and experiencing life on a bike in different countries and whatnot. I think that's pretty cool.
It's true. There's another hack that's coming to mind because a lot of times when you run into a store, I won't even lock my bike now. Because of this hack, you take like a section of inner tube. So you basically cut a ring. It's essentially an elastic band. Once you cut a ring right out of the inner tube, you know, that's the diameter of the inner tube, and you put it on your drop bars, and then you can pull your brake lever and wrap the elastic band around the brake lever, and it holds your brakes clamped. So if somebody took your bike and tried to roll it, they couldn't get very far, but it also comes in really handy when you're bike touring because, you know, you got to fool around with maybe fixing your disc brakes or something. And because your whole bike is rolling, it makes it very awkward, especially when it's loaded with gear. So this thing just keeps it stable from sliding up and down and helps out for doing bike mechanics and stuff as well. I love that hack.
Yeah, that's a nice, that has a variety of different uses. So I think that's pretty cool. That's a great idea. Well, Jesse, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, sharing all the hacks. And again, you're at oopsmark.ca if anybody wants to get in touch or to see more of your stuff. Thanks for being on Pedalshift.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And if people have things they want made that don't exist, let me know, because that's what we do.
I want to thank Jesse one more time for reaching out and being on the show. I thought that was a lot of really fun and interesting information and a lot of really cool tips. So use those liberally, I would say. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.